happy to take some questions or reflections or so on.
Thanks so much. Let's appreciate it. Thanks so much. Just in time. That's been very good. 2 hours of very thought-provoking presentation on pastoral infrastructures, and taken us through how it actually happens in practice. Us to move beyond some of the assumptions that have been made for many years about pastoral production. So I know Emery has been very his presentation as well. We'll do this for about 30 minutes or so. Have a say there.
Yeah, let me.
As we take questions. So the floor is open. Thank you very much.
If they exist, it's pattern recognition and scenario formulation. Notice how different that is. Notice what I didn't say. I didn't identify that as indigenous technology, knowledge, or local knowledge, or all of that is still important, but you do a great disservice to yourselves when somehow if you refer to pastoralists having their own knowledge systems, cosmologies, worldviews, indigenous technical knowledge. What I'm describing here is something much more specific. It may, not to say they don't have indigenous technical knowledge, but that's not the most important thing. What's most important is they know what to do in real time. They know what's next in a way that any outsider cannot know. And yes, they will make mistakes. But who are we to believe that the mistakes made by outsiders, in the absence of that, they don't know what they're doing, therefore we have to do it for them, are much more enormous.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment. Infrastructure-wise, and he has been telling us, he told us that I don't support the issue of the pastoralists being marginalized.
Being what?
Kind of shed some light on that.
I didn't
Why
hear
are
that.
they not marginalized? Yet, infrastructure-wise, they are backward, and their livelihood needs to be critically looked at even by the government, and other development partners. Kindly, Professor, shed some light regarding that.
When we drove up here for the trip, it was clear that when driving through Moronga and we entered Meru and then entering Marsabit County, there are differences there, okay, in terms of infrastructure, just what you get from driving on the road, okay. But I have always been, in my head, and I may be wrong, I defer to you, I may be wrong, but even if what you say is true, we need to push it further, okay? And the problem here is pushing the truth further. Not to say what your description is short, inadequate. I mean, I wouldn't use the terms, but nonetheless, I can see how they're used. I mean, that's a trip to somebody who's never been to Africa, driving from Nairobi to here. They would see it first thing. But I am not the costume I wear. I am not the set of practices I am. Okay. I am basically saying that even though I wear this costume and somebody else wears another costume, that the skills I'm talking about, the cognitive skills of pattern recognition and scenario formulation, are really, really very similar. And I want to stress that is, I defer to you, and I certainly don't have as much experience with pastoralists as I do with critical infrastructure control rooms. But nonetheless, there is a definite overlap, regardless of the guy in the control room wearing whatever costume that he finds appropriate.
Thank you. So the idea is more the inherent and innate properties that exist in that system.
There are scientists who say that the human beings have not significantly changed the global planet in such a way that we've reached a tipping point from what was called the Holocene and now into the Anthropocene. And there's science Scientists disagree with it. But one thing I will tell you is pastoralists have been living in the Anthropocene long before it was created as a term. This uncertainty that we face cannot be written off as ideological or a worldview. It is true radical uncertainty about the economics ahead. And in that sense, I believe that pastoralism is much more adaptable to these uncertainties. Well, and it won't be the same today as it will be later on, but is much more adaptable than so-called late capitalism is, and the varieties of neoliberal capitalism. That has a far shorter shelf life, in my view.
Professor, I want to use the statement. I don't know whether it is U.S. policy on investing where within pastoral areas.
Yes.
That where it lacks fresh water, they don't invest maybe hardwares. I don't know why are they shying away not to invest in like boreholes where there is no fresh water, but the pastoral they are using that alkaline water for production, but they rather go for where there is soft water. Are there policy in place within U.S. aid? They are shying away from that. I don't know.
I'm not familiar with the sort of herding, ranching policies in the United States, especially under the Bureau of Land Management or existing government structures. I think one of the things we learned, though, is that from the pastoralists that would be useful for the American setting, which you described, is this. Yesterday we were at a borehole site, and it was a small group of people, but one of the issue was raised was why couldn't we have standpipes brought from the borehole closer to the settlement area itself, closer to the individual households there. You see, pastoralism is a much better concept to understand this in terms of mobility. Pastoralists will, as infrastructure, pastoralists, there is the notion of bringing water to the livestock. There's a notion of bringing the livestock to the water. Drill the borehole and you bring the livestock. Or in your situation, the U.S., build a water point, construct a water point, and you can bring more cattle or whatever the herd is there. But pastoralism is, the mobility works two ways. It is also bringing the water to the user, not bringing the users to the water. So the most important thing I learned from yesterday's short presentation was the obvious point that if I had a priority, I who know nothing about this place, except 2 hours of sitting there, okay, if I had to say what was the priority from a pastoralist viewpoint, I would say, of course, it's moving those standpipes closer to the users, the households. That has to be a priority. That is most clearly a priority in the pastoral system that I just described, pastoralist framework. I'm sorry I couldn't answer your question directly.
Is that we have this struggle, and the struggle is we have already been put in some straitjackets, and the straitjackets come from our background, the exposures that we have in terms of our bringing up, in terms of education, what we are taught in schools, and some of the things that we talked about, for example, carrying capacity. I don't know if the rangeland guys at the University of Nairobi have changed, for instance, how carrying capacity is defined even up to now. And here you are telling us that, this is the way to look at it, and different other examples. So there are these straitjackets which are difficult to shade and see things from a new light. And that is what I see you trying to explain, that things can always be looked at from different perspectives. Maybe if you have an idea, how do we navigate all this, the straitjackets we are individually put in, is another thing. The other thing is we are also equally put in some sort of other straitjackets when we are working in the development context. We rely on funding, from external sources. And these fundings comes with objectives, come with timelines, comes with deliverables. And you don't have time to really juggle all that you have, explained. We have very limited room for maneuver. So I wonder also then, how can we adapt the thinking that you are presenting here within this context? Maybe just a little bit of, how do we navigate that?
As you got from my presentation, I have some background in livestock and traditional, so-called traditional pastoralist, agro-pastoral stuff. And I've been following this, even though I've shifted my interest over the last 30 years to US and Western European large critical infrastructures. I've been having one eye, literally, one eye on the pastoralist developments. And I believe when I started out in the early 70s, working in Botswana, then moved to Kenya, I believe some of these same narratives and stories told then are still being told, when it's quite clearly not the case that they hold. Okay, and I've been bothered by that. And other than to sort of gripe and complain. But in working with infrastructures, I found a different way of saying to you, as I said in the beginning, let's assume you're right. Everything you say and hold about pastoralists in Marsabit or wherever you're from, let's say everything is right. Can we actually push that further? And I submit to you, nothing of what I described today will do a disservice to any of your views about what you think pastoralists are. It will be saying to you, change the lens just carefully, and you will be seeing that, I submit, that these people, these systems are much more important to the global economy, and that donors are not at fault when they don't buy into, or only a few donors buy into, the notion of the marginalized, marginal, herder, not educated, sufficiently educated, when in fact the onus is on large donors in their consistent ignoring a global infrastructure critical and at the core of the Anthropocene. Now all those you're just hearing it from me, right? Don't believe me. But if you do believe some of that, then the onus is on the donor in a way, the burden is on the donors and the governments in a way. You sort of coming there and saying, listen, we have all these poor people, they haven't shared the fruits of development, the highlands got the fruits of development, they're getting worse and worse and worse, and they're dying, their herds are going off, and you wonder why they don't come to you. They will come to you, I believe, when they cannot ignore you. And I suggest there are probably many other ways than you've heard today to get their attention, but this is one way, I think. And I used to work with a lot of donors, so.
Thank you, Professor and Dr. It's been 2 hours of a lot of learning. One, we have some snippets or phrases that are very interesting to me. Reliability professionals framework and the reliability professionals in pastoralism. We have always come from background where we have looked at pastoralism as an old, long forgotten way of life, that it has been regarded as a backward adventure by the pastoral communities, and we have always encouraged people to move away from pastoralism for some long times, and then we are now coming back and seeing pastoralism in a different light.
Yes.
So we are now looking at some smaller facets that has made pastoralism to withstand all this pressure of development, the pressure that this is a backward thing, and pastoralism has been a resilient practice through the ages, and it has survived up to today. So we are looking at, and it is more of a reliable system in the asals So we are looking at, one, are those reliable professionals still exist, and do this knowledge exist among the pastoral communities, so that we will look at this as something that has made this infrastructure to withstand all these processes of changes and anti-pastoralism throughout the ages. So if we look at these reliability professionals and the framework and look like pastoralism, not in the sense of a way of livelihood as such, but more of an infrastructural system that we can inject or we can study and then make it survive the hardship. So I'm looking at, then with the changes that we are seeing also, the land tenure system that has changed, which has hampered pastoral and the migratory pastoralism work. And then the policies that maybe in this country, most of the policies that have been defining land, defining pastoralism, is a copycat policies that has been tried in high agricultural potential areas and is just copy pasted into the ASAL systems. So are we looking at now, maybe part of what we will see in the study that we will be having for the 3 years to come is that maybe the copycat policies that have been done in the Kilimo House, the agricultural department, and then it is like the production of dairy animals becomes the production of pastoral livestock, will become it's something that this study needs to shed light on, that among the reliable professionals that and the professional background that exist among the local communities who are practicing pastoralists, whether what you call Dr. Hussein was calling them the Uchus there, or we have also the scouts, we have all other professionals that have made these things survive. If you can go deeper into this reliable professional background that exists across the different tribal communities, pastoral communities and the pastoral grouping, if you can get this framework and maybe document it, it can become part of an output for your study that will also define the policy formulation framework at the national level or at the county level. I don't know whether this thing is even devolved to these levels that people can look at it. So I'll look forward to get the results of these studies that Dr. is talking about, to see that it is like we are invigorating pastoralism. It's like we are saying pastoralism is the way to go because ASAL exists and can be maintained through pastoralism with all its challenges. Thank you.
Hussein, did you want to reply to some of that or
No, you
the
can.
project? Yeah, I would just like to pick up some of the thoughts on that, and I really do appreciate your openness to look at this. It basically, in more detail, but I want to walk out, to add a little complexity to this, is the notion of the reliability professionals I described is not a cure for policies that people don't understand, okay? You will have people making policies for the rest of your lives and your children's life, okay? And they'll all sit in Nairobi, okay? And or in Washington, D.C. or something. Those people, they think this way. They think cookie cutter, copycat. Why isn't it going on just like we said it should? So the positive thing, but the positive thing of the reliability professionals is they're the secret shapers. What happens, they're like mushrooms grow in the dark. They're out there making these changes in order to get the same reliability, healthcare, water, education, that the policy types wanted. So you actually have to work together. Way you work together is to constantly remind the policymaker that better practices that have evolved over a course of pastoralists, different parts of Kenya, or parts of northern Kenya, different counties, those practices are just as important as the current policy is. and to remind them, look, there's always a gap between the way you design this thing versus what people are actually doing on the ground, not at the single site, but across all the sites that matter. So it will never be a comfortable position with respect to the policy types. But without the policy types, you can't get things going. You can't get the funding, you can't get the initiatives. I in no way am justifying GOK policy with respect to pastoralists, but I'm much more hopeful because they can't control everything. You do have some flexibility.
Maybe Rahman coming a little bit to the high reliability existence.
Yeah, I know she will talk about that about her reflection.
Reflections on this whole work and Emery's intervention, it would be good to say that we really appreciate your comment in terms of pushing back to us to also move this work forward, at least one step ahead in terms of how we see it working in the topics we are working on. So one thing is, when you look up about resilience building, we have an early warning function component, and then anticipatory action component, and humanitarian assistance component. We see a range of reliability networks emerging in our work. At least we are here to say this is not strange to our system, and that is why Emery is here to also help us look at it broadly. And I like the broadly work. Yeah, it is true that we have indigenous knowledge for early warning, but beyond that, what we see, at least we have gone beyond that, we see multiple sources of early warning information and how they interact within a reliability network. For instance, other than an indigenous Uchu, there is someone who is able to pull these different sources of information together real time and share from the radio, from the NDMA. So there are high reliability professionals within a network of a multiple source of information. So even if pastoralists have internal mechanisms to support their livelihoods, within this critical infrastructure way of looking at it, we see them in how they mobilize resources, how they seek external support other than scenario formulation, so going to the pattern recognition, and how they support their daily decisions. So that they hold the system together is not in doubt. We are getting closer to that. But we would like to hear from people like you who are also engaging in different parts of this work so that we look at these interconnected networks in a way that we can have a resilience framework that is embedded in high reliability networks. So we will get there, but as Emery says, it's not a one-time solution or a counter solution. It is another option, in the way of thinking, how else can we look at this? How differently can we view this? And can we try from the CRDD action research and make some pilot examples? So that's just my little addition to your important comment.
Thank you, Rama. Possibly can get the last question, then we can go to the reflection.
Yes, Professor, thank you for the good presentation. My question is on the modernization and the current technology. For example, in the past, people used donkeys when they migrate to carry the goods. And now in the modern world, we have the border motorbike, which is one of the emerging. And even the herders there, now they use the motorbike to carry their goods when they are migrating, or even transporting the camel milk from one center to another using border. So how are we going to factor the modernization or technology? Then the other thing is also the now emerging of the mobile phones. For example, a mother in Walda will send milk to Isiolo, and she just make a phone call to the vendor so that she can collect the milk from Isiolo without, going there. Then the mother also send the money through M-Pesa. And these people, if you look at, they even never saw each other, but they do the business, as an online way using the technology. So how can we maybe factor the modernization, the technology as part of the pastoralism?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Then we get the last one there.
I mean, that is as part of this is another example where we need to push what you know further, okay? that the terminology, modernization again, is something is different than increasing the options variety. What you just described is something reliability professionals, even before modernization, did a very good job. They were always looking for ways to increase options to respond to unpredictable change in order to maintain more stable livelihoods, even though they didn't use those words, okay? So the use of the cell phone that you described, or the use of the motorbike, is a way to increase the option set with respect to volatility, that uncontrollability, unpredictability of the task environment that you can control. Why is this important? I said it's always been there, okay? Why is this important? You cannot believe the grief it caused anthropologists coming to Kenya or Tanzania or places I'm more familiar with. When they walk into a Samburu household set, traditional household set, and find that women now use red plastic buckets. I mean, the grief over it, is this modernization? Is this like destroying the pastoralist system? Is this like, you know, I mean, is this the end of pastoralist indigenous technology? No, folks. Red plastic buckets do not destroy the logic. The logic of what I described to you is high input variability is matched by high process variability to achieve low infrastructure outputs. The fact that the national grid is constantly innovating and adding new technology is increasing options variety. That's what you expect infrastructures to do. So that the fact that you have cell phones or motorbikes, I wasn't aware to until yesterday, so I should have raised that in my presentation. The fact that that it doesn't look like old Uncle Sam's hammer that you used before, now it looks like more a mechanical hammer, doesn't cease the logic of it. The logic is still infrastructural, okay? But you would never get there by using the language of modernity, I would argue, modernization, because that language suddenly assumes, oh, you have to depastoralize in order to get them to be modern. The beads that were used in South Africa in their so-called traditional Zulu costumes came from Czechoslovakia in the 19th century. I mean, this has always been modern stuff coming in. They use what is at hand to ensure the reliability of the system.
Thank you. So,
I think most of the concept which is being proposed deviate from the current practice, but in a good way. Some of these proposed practices can be very transformative and very
Yes.
important for us.
Yes.
But adapting that requires like a system level approach or changes at the system level, which is not something that we can wake up today and say maybe we can change.
True.
But there are small things that maybe at our local level, the research can propose for us to adapt at this level. So is there a plan maybe that we can filter out some of the things that we can be able to adopt at our local level, and it's manageable within our scope? So is there a plan maybe that we can get such kind of best practices that we can adopt at our level?
The thing is, if I tried to describe to you the Kenya I found in 1982 versus the Kenya I saw yesterday, and say there's an enormous difference, okay, in what I saw, and I would call some of this improvement, total improvement, that won't convince you. But over the course of what I'm asking you is, you become not only a pull, you become a push factor. I say to you that even what people describe here today as good policy, you have to push them further And the only way you can push them further is to have a pull, something that pulls them to look at it differently. And I'm not selling my approach, I'm not a donor or whatever. But hey, the more pull you have, the more that, hey, this is working, but it isn't working great. The more you have at the local level, the more variety, requisite variety is called, the better off you are for certain. The more projects, the more programs, the more pull at work. That is great.
Yeah, and maybe just, okay.
In essence of it, why we had Emery here is, can we plant a seed?
That's not my greatest fear. I know I'm ignorant of your situations here. My greatest fear is that the donors and the government will take this idea and run with it. Because they will push it up to a macro design format. They will cookie cutter it, copy and paste it. So I'm here partly, really, why I'm here and Louisa is here. We're taking the time to do this because we think we're talking to the right people at the right level. Okay? It's you here at the county level and possibly several different counties around you, obviously down to Isiolo, another county. It's you here who have a better understanding, can you run with this without having it destroy you, by being picked up as a cure-all. Now, I'm not saying, hey, that wouldn't make me happy, the notion of a cure-all. But I will say this, is that I know this is the right level because when I was here in 1982, 84, there was the coup attempt against Daniel Arap Moi. And one of the products of that coup attempt was district focus. And district focus was the first effort to devolution. And that failed for a variety of different reasons. It just didn't catch. But you guys, even with your budgetary problems, have gone through devolution now. There are counties and sub-counties. Okay, that didn't exist before. And that has to be better. I know it's more conflict. I know it means more turbulence, more complexity. But for the thing that I'm talking about, reliability professionals thrive on complexity. There's a better chance you guys will see them than we did in the Ministry of Finance at the time of district focus.
Thank you so much. Let's appreciate Emery once more. And thanks so much also for your very appropriate questions to Emery. So an appreciation to you as well. Huh? Thank you so much. So at this point, we're going to have Dr. Rahma Hassan, who's been the researcher at the heart of this project, to do a brief reflection based on the conversations we've had since morning.
We move with our work and we think about this as a new way to incorporate. And for us also is to further do what Rahma said, try still to look a little bit further into this question, come up with examples, from our own settings and share, within frameworks. I said we have summer school coming up, for example, for master's students, PhD students, and it's the same thing, conversing this at that level for a whole week, just to see what is it that can we get from it, how can we relate that to our own experiences and the work that we do. We will then talk to practitioners even a little bit more. So these are the plans that we have as this small project. But then, of course, it is upon us all to see what is useful. Can we pick from this and take it forward?
Thanks. Before we give it to Rahma, I also have last question. A few weeks ago, I attended a national pastoralist conference, which was rather the inaugural one, the first one. And in attendance was a former minister of ASO areas, Hon Elmi, who's been a good student of some of the things I've been discussing, borrowing from Ian Skun's work, for instance. And he narrated how when they were working on the ASO policy, which has been, acclaimed as a game changer on how ASOs are approached and understood. So he said that they really struggled and worked hard to keep aside the marginalization sort of baggage when designing the frame. And so, as many of us will relate, the title that they adopted was Realizing Our Full Potential. So the potential, because they say there's a lot of potential. But then he lamented that it looks like other people did not really understand what potential they were meaning, because they have seen a whole growth of infrastructure in these areas that is displacing people, the large fragmentation. Long story short, we anticipate, based on the work that we are doing on this concept, it's likely to be uptick. Conversations that we're having with humanitarian development workers around, putting at the center the whole concept is likely to gain traction. But we have also seen that sort of misinterpretation and the use of some of these concepts, including concepts like resilience, that is now just buzzword. So we possibly may see high reliability, professionals being at the center of design and implementation of activities in these areas. But it runs the risk of also being used for convenience. Do you have ideas how, whether that's likelihood and maybe how that can be navigated to avoid the same trap? Thanks.
Who have found a place where there's a locally embedded research institution at CRDD who are likely to yield locally adaptive, flexible, probably practices, which they can pilot and see if they can have better outcomes. So for the research team in the room, I would like to thank you for enabling us to make this conversation live, because without that, the theoretical notions we've been studying and reading we would not be able to make these interconnected theoretical approaches with the empirical evidence you bring. So I think they're here, they know themselves. I just wanted to applaud them for making us here. So yeah, in addition to that, I just also wanted to say we have been straddling between several theoretical approaches. And I think how we are lucky or privileged is that we have this knowledge group forming around pastoralism in East Africa. We have Ian Skuns as an advisor working with us, and many of us studying in these areas and from these areas at CRDD, which is also linked to the community. So we have this unique opportunity where we explore concepts of risks and uncertainties as they were being described here very closely. That is not new to us when we think about uncertainty. When we hear about relational resilience and how resilience is evolving to be more locally embedded, or how people's practices and knowledge change, we see that within the pastoral context. On the high reliability networks, and pastoralism as critical infrastructure is another hat we are adding to the theoretical concepts that are interconnected in our work. So just to say, we are lucky in that sense, and we are also all the community and the people who share these stories with us to be able to interpret their stories. So that's the other burden with us as the research team. So sometimes we may run away with some ideas of high reliability networks and misinterpret the system. Luckily, we have the time to stay and listen and deliberate the stories like we are with you, who work in different parts of this pastoral context. So one of the things that struck me when we were talking about marginalization is also the other idea of the disaster narratives that have continued to be peddled in policy documents and reports. And we also see these concepts as trying to turn the tide. So you can't always talk about how things are not working. You also have to ask, how has this system been held together anyway, now that you keep reporting that it's not working? But how does it work, even if there's nobody intervening? So what do local communities say are the systems or the people or the networks that held them together during the failure of 5 consecutive rains, for instance, like we asked them last time? So thinking about Emery's intervention on how to identify these reliability professionals, I was struck by the idea about this damage or these problems that were never meant to happen, like the loss of an entire herd. But then this has now quietly become a norm, like people are losing herds. So this is shifting us to the avoided events, just trying to reflect back to Emery's concept, and the inevitable events. But that was about the anticipatory actions we are talking about. Everybody is talking about how can we work so that we don't lose the herds? What can we do before the crisis comes here? But for humanitarians who work in these areas, it will be important for them to think about how they can draw on some of the systems and the locally embedded structures. So trying to bring it closer home from our research. The concepts that link the ability of pastoralists to maneuver the different risks to the external support that they find, so that these two do not come and clash, that they are coming together to support an existing system that is operating in an infrastructure that is already there. It is true that the infrastructure we are describing and referring to is not perfect, and that comes to the implications Emery referred to. So, and we can ask as researchers, what is the obsession with these 100% optimal systems that everybody wants to see? These systems are not perfect, and imperfect systems must not be eradicated. They need to be supported to yield the best with the percentages that they're able to yield at every time. But the trust and the connectedness of these reliability networks is also something we see that is very unique to the East African pastoralism that we are studying. People and groups and networks that hold crucial information on the ground, linking to international systems that are coming in for the first time in these areas, or are trying to make changes and incorporate these knowledge systems to be able to work better. Then there is this dynamic and flexible natural resource access arrangement in this area, and how reliability networks are at the center of this. So I'll move away from many of those points and go to the implications, and I have a few things to say here, so I can share my time with Luis. I think you can take the last few minutes to make some intervention. So the idea of scenario formulation and pattern recognition, from what Emery shared, is very critical for us, thinking of the macro designs that we all know about and the micro operations we are finding from our evidence from the field. So in between here, we saw the high reliability professionals and networks straddling this, what we can call pastoral sensitive programming. How does that look like? If you were to break down the macro designs into micro operations, where we have the resilient herder and the resilient community. So there are also local herders who are connecting with NGOs. Others are elders and scouting water pasture. These are examples of high reliability networks and professionals we are finding in our field. And of course, in terms of the implications, if the dread of this infrastructure or the high reliability network is everybody there dreads that the system will collapse. The dread of the system collapse drives reliability management. I'm quoting Emery just a few minutes ago. So then thinking about the work we do, what should drive humanitarians and development actors if they come in as external actors? If the system, people holding the system together in this on their own, are dreading the collapse of this system, what should, like the dread of the collapse of loss of lives is what humanitarians at least say they work for. And now we add livelihoods. So how do these two work together so that people trying to make sure there's something in place so that the system doesn't collapse are working towards the same thing and not different things? So another point is, if disasters that have been averted have financial benefit, how can we package that in a way, as CRDD, as researchers here, so that the humanitarians are able to see the benefit of our approach or the issues that we discuss? So also thinking about what makes most sense to humanitarians. So the disaster that they dread is loss of lives, and the disaster that they dread we add is livelihoods. They should think about livelihoods as well. But now, if disasters averted have a financial benefit, what does our model or our evidence say about this process? So instead of talking about risks, we should be talking about, the global infrastructure. And I've already talked about the obsession of an infrastructure that runs 100%. And I think this links to some pushback information. Now, next time people say pastoralists need to diversify, we can ask them why they are obsessed with an infrastructure that runs 100% when we know now other infrastructure runs 100%. The restocking point is very interesting. And I think for the officials from county government, from NGOs who work here, the intricate balance around restocking, the questions of how this has worked or not worked, And we are learning a bit of a few things, new things. For instance, yesterday in our interview, I think Louise was sharing with someone this morning, we asked them, what would you do differently if you were to restock? And they said, you can restock. That is our number one priority. We would like some livestock. But please take one of us who's knowledgeable about the health of animals and livestock to that market. And look at that simple solution. They're not saying buy from this area. They're saying you can buy from wherever. But just so that we are also working in this system together, draw on the knowledge and the ability for people to see what works for them. Pastoralist systems have also been highly criticized for inequality. Responding to that, I think we are looking at these household dynamics and then these ideas about how different groups share labor, the inequalities and how they manifest during different times, including during emergencies and humanitarian crises, which is a topic we are working on. But that also helps us to think about targeting for humanitarian assistance, social protection programs, and how they respond to this idea of inequalities. So that the obsession is not so much everybody is equal, but what different programs can be tailored for different groups in the community. So I thought that was very interesting and fitting within our work. So the other one is pastoralists are being displaced. So there's pushback now for this inevitable transformation in the drylands. Everybody says there's nothing you can do. But then there's also the phenomena of pastoralism in transition. So that the point we make is not so much that we want to endear everybody to a mode of production of mobility, but so that we just honor communities' way of doing things that work best for them in a production system. So those who pull out, send their children to school, track their animals to Warsaw, cross over to Ethiopia to do business, all those are part of the system. So it is not so much about a certain mode of production of pastoralism that we would like to show, and I think that's important for us. I will not go into the carrying capacity, the equilibrium or non-equilibrium. Hussein has already mentioned that. But I just lastly wanted to say we have an important contribution. We feel the weight. We feel the privilege, but the weight on our shoulders to be able to do this to the best of our ability. And I think from the researcher's side of things, we would like to pay attention to what people say, because even when we are drawing on reliability networks, we want to know from the communities who they rely on. We don't want to create the list on ourselves. And this is a process that requires some methodological ideas that, that need to transform the way we ask the questions. Some of what we were learning with our colleagues in the field yesterday about how to get to a point without asking people directly, bearing in mind some of the participatory methods, maybe which Louise can also talk about briefly. So we will make an attempt to look at this differently. And this is what we are asking all of you to work with us. I think Hussein is here on behalf of CRDD. Our research is to continue sharing what we are finding along the way. And we have this opportunity for policy discussions along the way so that we don't produce a product at the end and come and say, okay, here is the framework. So for instance, today, listening to you, I have something different to think about when I go to the field next time. So this idea is what we would like to encourage. And so we thank you for joining us in deliberating our ongoing findings. And most importantly, our colleague Emery and Louise for helping us explore further and also bearing with what we are learning and honoring the voices from the field. Thank you very much. And I think, Hussein, please take over.
Good reflection. Now, as we come close to this session, we've been trying to keep time, and I'm really proud about that. I want to give Lois a minute or two or three maybe, to say something. She has something around questions that don't just go away. Luis, you want to come over here? Yeah.
Say something very important first. Yes, I am a professor at the University of California at Berkeley, but no, I am not an expert. And if you meet a person who says he or she is an expert, you should run away as fast as possible because they probably don't know what they're doing. I have brought something that may be totally useless, but 4 minutes? Sure. Okay. In the 90s, the decision was, people said, wait, we are doing participatory research all over the global south, and we're not doing it here. Why is that? And so the Ford Foundation sponsored a project for research by American students at the community level using participatory methods. Native American researchers, students, Black researchers and students, Hispanic researchers and students, Asian researchers and students, and white researchers and students. And every year we had a big, oh my gosh, don't show those to my grandchildren or my students. Every year we'd have workshops, a yearly workshop, and the students would come and also their community partner would come. The students had 5 minutes to talk about their project. I can't do this while holding this. The community partners had 10 minutes to talk about the project. So we really tried to respect local knowledge. And after many years, we realized that there were questions that happened every time that just wouldn't go away. And I don't know if they're enough. I'm going to pass these around. If you don't get one, I'm going to send a virtual copy to CRDD. Yeah, Emery, don't take one. But these are the questions that participatory researchers in the United States, looking at the United States, so this may not be useful, and I won't be offended if you put it in the wastebasket. But these are the questions that we came up with every time from the students about participatory research. So I give it to you with all humility. We are not experts. This may not be relevant to you, but I had a whole lot of copies of this article. So thank you very much. And thank you, CRDD, for hosting us and teaching us so much on that field trip yesterday. I'm very grateful. Nashukuru sana.
Thank you so much, Luis, to bring us some mangoes. So as you go out, you can pick one at your discretion. Yeah. She just bought them along the way. She found them so fresh, good, and she said, why not share this with you? So we have mangoes here for you to pick one as you go out. Asante sana.
Ni tamu sana, kweli.
Yes, we actually have some time before lunch.
Okay.
So let's let him finish. Then,
Yes, let me finish, and then I'll come.
Yeah, we have some minutes. Rumara utampata?
Eh.
I just make sure I pick one because I don't want to miss.
Okay. We'll pick them as they go, so don't worry about that. Yes. So from us, we really thank you so much. And of course, we have quite a number of our partners here from non-governmental organizations, as well as from the government. And sometimes with us on researchers and non-governmental organizations, we're not so good at following government protocols. And we might fail to appreciate you guys enough. Forgive us for that. But I would like to give a word to Armara Galwap, who is the CCC, who is with us, to say a word or two. Karibu hapa, tafadhali.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hussein. Thank you, Professor Emery. Thank you, Professor, the name? Professor Luis. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, partners. Mine is very brief, and as a pastoralist, and also somebody who is working along the pastoralist development initiative, the word pastoralism and rangeland sustainability are catching words for development agencies and for government. As has been said before, most of the arid and semi-arid parts of Kenya is entirely habited by pastoralism. And other alternative livelihoods like crop farming may not do well unless in cases whereby we do irrigation, which most of the time is a bit expensive. We also know, and I do believe you agree with me, that most of the time pastoralism has been taken as a backward or unsustainable business or mechanism because of impact of climatic changes, other investment which are eating into their lands, and also conversion of pastoralism land for agricultural purposes. So due to this stringent and very harsh condition, many a times they find themselves in a situation whereby they don't develop, or most of their policies have not been taken into consideration. As government and as partners, they have been working on the best measures on how they can incorporate development, or they can bring development into pastoralism. But climatic condition has been a bit of a harsh condition, or has been a bit of a challenge to them. I do believe we have policies that we needed to address or to bring into the pastoralism, but due to financial gaps or due to missing the gap, especially what needed to be done, many times it has not been done. If you look especially on northern part, especially Marsabit, as it has been given, I think one of the points, I don't know, point number 2 or number 8, I don't know, there was development or water plants or development of road or opening up of infrastructure. But then these infrastructures are capital intensive, and many a times we do patchy things. You develop a small piece of land, or you develop a small section of the road, then the larger part of it has not been developed. And at the end of the day, it's like just going back to square one. We have not done completely anything. In terms of improvement of water resources, you may find that a partner or government will initiate a project, which at the end of the day is not a mega project or some small project, which will also prompt you to do a number of them because one may not be enough. So you'll find that some activities, a small activity has been done, a small plan has been done, but then it is not something sustainable. But if you look critically, if finances were there, most of these partners, including the researchers, they can tell you exactly what is needed to be done. But then measures have not yet been done. As government, we are trying to incorporate policies through partner organization, because many times they do support government to develop policies. It is something that I know it will take time, but I do believe that in the long run, pastoralism will, at the end of the day, will be appreciated. I know in developed countries, currently everybody is talking about organic farming, organic livestock production, sustainability of rangelands. But in a controlled system like currently in Kenya or in northern Kenya, we are yet to reach even half of what is needed to be done. Therefore, I, as a government representative, I wanted to call upon all the partners to partner with the government, the national government and the county government, so that they can reach the level that other countries in the world have reached. Because at the end of the day, we may not advise pastoralism to run away from that practice, because at the end of the day, there is nothing wrong with pastoralism. It is only that we have not gotten the measures that are supposed to be taken. For those of us who are local here, if you look across the arid and semi-arid region, the water level is getting saline, and that is as a result of climatic changes or any other factors that maybe I may not know. That being the case, even if you want to introduce crop farming at a small scale, it may not be doable because of that salinity levels. And it is also slowly eating into human, because at the end of the day, there are some section or some site within Kenya or within the arid lands or even in Marsabit that you are told, please do not open up boreholes that have a certain level of salinity. And if you critically look at it, there were some areas that were not saline before, but currently everywhere you'll find that this borehole has been drilled
maybe a year ago, it was not saline, but currently it is saline. So that indicates that the best measure that we need to go for is harnessing or harvesting rainwater, and that is the only way that we can say the use of rainwater. You can use it for a niche or for multiple purposes, be it for crop farming, be it for livestock use or for human use. At the end of the day, that can help. I think that's the brief that I can say, and maybe on behalf of the government, I want to thank the organizers of this workshop, CRDD, other partners that I may not be knowing, and also the presenters, the two professors who are here, and any other partner who has contributed. Thank you very much, and have a blessed day.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, and all the other partners, and thanks for the overview of development within the county and the call for us to join hands. And part of the thing that, of course, as CRD we like to keep with us is how can we bring in new thoughts, new ideas, push the knowledge borders, and that is what the journey that we'll all go together. So I appreciate you all once again very much for helping us to walk this journey, and it's not the end, and we are in the midst of what we're doing, and we would like to work with you and many others not in the room to keep up these conversations. And this is not just the only line of conversation. There are others, issues around water, for example. We always think that once a borehole is done, issues are sorted, people are resilient. That is a measure that we sort of rely on. But what you've said shows us what other things that we need to think about, and many more issues that we can think about. Now, for CRDD, we really appreciate this kind of partnerships and this kind of conversation. There's a colleague I met recently, and one of the things that she said, which I found it a little bit difficult, is she said, Hussein, you have to feel proud of what you're doing. And it's not something that we're not used to in our culture, being proud. We want to play things a little bit low. But today I feel a bit proud to be able to call upon you, have you present, very keen, asking those questions. And I'm certain that we have planted a seed, and we'll really want to work with you to keep that seed growing. So thank you very much. And lastly, to Emery and Lois, we can't thank you enough. We just met by chance online through, of course, Ian and our colleagues. And imagine them volunteering to come all this way at their own cost. We're not paying anything for their time, for the journey that they have made. If they wanted to be in Masai Mara right now, it was their choice. And they chose to be here to share all this with us. And we really appreciate, and we don't take it for granted. And we look forward to, of course, keeping this conversation up with you too. So, in appreciation, my colleagues here said, you'll get a small present from here that you will take along, and it will keep you reminded, of course, of us and the region. So, Salat, if you can help me, please. Yeah. If you can come. And Luis, if you can also come this way. Tafadhali. Fardosa.
Come and help us. This gift.
So, asanteni sana. Yes.
This gift, when we write about, we say principles of solidarity, social connectedness, when you're describing pastoral livelihoods and people. Now, Emery has been wrote about pastoralism as people way before anybody could even think of them as even a local infrastructure. Forget a global infrastructure. So to keep the social connectedness going, and Louise, who is very kind and doesn't want to say how she worked so hard in this part of the world, as a memory for her and from us, I think Hussein, we'll
give it to Salad, yeah.
To Salad, we'll know how to work on this, and Fardosa will help me to dress. So you ask for help, I will have Luis here with me, and Fardosa. Yeah. Fardosa, unti na right.
Oh, wow.
This is our traditional shuka. I don't know what you call it. This is how they do it. And this other one is called roof. Used by
Ben? Makati mama.
It's called roof. It's called banjo.
Yes. Niko kalmas.
We need the picture. This is for grandchildren too.
Yes.
Asanteni.
Thank you.
He's taking a photo.
It's been a privilege to be here for all this time.
And I am going back to my Kiswahili class. Nitava.
Thanks. So we'll have a group photo out there, and then we'll have lunch together at the same restaurant. So asanteni sana. Thank you so much.